Awesome.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, Ryan Seare. I'm so glad that you're here. For everybody listening, I just want to tee up a little bit why I'm so excited for this conversation. But so Ryan is, I'm going to call you almost a serial entrepreneur, but you own multiple businesses. You're my cousin, by the way. You are a father, a real estate investor, a husband, a community leader, so many things. But at the top of that list, you're also the world's greatest 100-mile pacer.
Oh, that's a good title.
So
above all things, except for maybe being a dad, I that might be my second favorite thing.
Put up with me through, the dark times at Buffalo Run. No, but jokes aside, it was, for everyone listening, Ryan paced me at Buffalo Run 100. It picked me up at, I think, at mile 50 and ran with me for 30 miles. So you ran an ultra marathon yourself through the night, and I think you clocked out at like 3 a.m., 3:30 or something like that.
It was a good night.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It wasn't intended to be that way. When your dad called me and said, Ben's struggling, and I said, well, would it help if I just got out and started running right now? And he's like, yeah, I think so. It won't hurt him. And so I was like, all right, well, I'd rather run than sit in my car and wait for you to get to mile 60. So,
right.
So it was, it was good.
And I appreciated that so much. In fact, if I haven't properly thanked you, thank you.
You've thanked me.
It was a special experience. But part of that is we got to spend, I don't know how long you ended up running, but it was hours and hours and hours.
Probably 10 hours.
Probably 10
we
hours.
had to have spent a good chunk of.
So we got to spend 10 hours together, in the remote corners of Antelope Island on single track running around. And, through that process, we got to kind of chat and swap stories and all of that. So anyway, that kind of led me to thinking, man, we're cousins and I know you as well as any cousin, but I don't know you that well, all the details of your story and all that. So it was really fun for me to kind of and even just now before we started recording, when we were upstairs swapping, we've got a little bit of an age difference. So it was fun for me to have these.
We figured out on that run that I'm closer to your dad's age than I am to your age.
Are you?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think we're only maybe 13 years apart or something. And you and I are. Let's see, I turned 50 this year,
and I turned 34. So
34,
we're
16, and I think
apart.
I'm 13 or 14 from yours.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that explains it. My uncle Ryan. Yeah. No, but I'm stoked about it. So one of the things I'm curious about, I know from a business ownership perspective, you've got Lemco Flooring at least, and then Fernway, your other kind of retail store.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've got other businesses or not, but I'd love to hear about your journey into business ownership. Have you always kind of known that you'd be an entrepreneur and a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't set out on that course. It wasn't like I thought, I've got to go to school so I can learn these tactics and strategies and acquire knowledge so that I could go do it. But I do remember when I was in my early 20s, I started working for Lemco, which I later purchased. And I saw a need in the industry where I would go to these big commercial projects and apartment complexes specifically, and we were doing the work in there for the Lemco's a flooring store. And I remember seeing the need that they needed somebody to come in and clean the space before they could hand it over to the first tenants that were going to use it. And so just out of the blue, I started a company and I called it Lemco Cleaning. And we did turnkey construction cleaning services. And I hired 6 or 7 of my friends that were going to college with me. And it was a real thrill for me. I went down and I opened up a bank account and I had checks that had our company name on them. And I would remember my buddies all lining up once a week and I'd write them out a check for the work that they did. And it was just fun. I had a great time doing it. And made some money doing it, not a lot of money, but enough. But I just remember the thrill and excitement that I had of just taking something and starting it from scratch.
Of building it, yeah. I relate to that so much. So when Ascent Digital was an idea in my mind, and now actually, with the benefit of hindsight and I look back, I was kind of born, I think, to be an entrepreneur. I don't know if you remember or not, but I used to do I had a trash can cleaning company. Yep. I used to rent my parents' VHS tapes out of our garage. I mean, all these things.
Yeah, great stuff.
But even what you're mentioning there about having the name on the check, That I remember that so clearly when I started Ascent Digital and I had my first business card and I got this little like, I don't know, the bank gave me like a packet
Yeah.
of stuff with like my business bank accounts and, business checks and whatever. And I remember just feeling like, holy cow, it's real.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing. So how wild to think that you did that in
If
college.
if you know that feeling, you know that feeling. And I remember, Fernway we started 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago, and it was an idea that was brewing in the back of my head forever. But the most exciting thing that we did in the startup was designing the business cards, and we wanted them to be, I think they're called paper press, where they were cardstock, and then they actually did the indentation into them. And we spent probably 100 times more on these business cards than we had any business spending.
Of course.
I mean, I remember getting done just with the business cards, and I'm like, dude, we just dropped thousands of dollars on business cards. I was like, how stupid is that? But I would hold them up, and they were so cool, and I was like, I'm so proud of this, the business card, and that was I was so excited about the branding and we started it from scratch, and it was we have partners that have done that with us. And that whole idea, for the listeners, Fernway is a gift and lifestyle company. So you can go in and you can buy lifestyle items. So but in the conceptualization of it, it was we wanted to sell things out of that store that we loved.
Yeah.
That we wouldn't sell it unless we used it ourselves. So my first thing is I was like, well, I got to go get an account with Patagonia, and I got to get an account with Yeti coolers, and I got to get. So I was on my own doing that, and Jill was saying, "Well, I love this lotion, and I love these home products that I've got." So she was opening those accounts, and our partners were doing the same thing, and it was mayhem. It was so chaotic, and we were all just opening up accounts with these people that we love using their products, and that's kind of how the idea started. Is we said, what if we open up a store and just sold things that we love to use ourselves. So
the Fernway one specifically, I've obviously paid attention to that kind of like popping up and when you guys first started it. And I've been a huge fan of that brand since you started it. I've actually never, don't get mad, I've never been in the store, but
you're in Heber, go
yeah,
over.
I'll go
You'll have to go see it now.
But I want to know about that process because I'm in marketing and I love brand. I love building brands. Fernway, it's such a unique brand, and like instantly when you even see the typeface and the word Fernway, you get the feel for it. It seems like it's just so dialed, and I'm curious, how did that brand come about?
Yeah, that was our favorite part of starting that. So the way the store came about is I bought a building in Midway. And we were going to open up a flooring store in it because the Heber Valley where we're doing this podcast is growing at a rate that's exceptional. I mean, it's one of the fastest growing communities probably in the West. I mean, it's in the top 5 or 10 at least. And so we bought this building, and I was going to do flooring out of it. And I remember it was an old art gallery. Robert Duncan was the artist. A lot of people will recognize that name. And he had moved on everything to online, but he had built this beautiful timber building. And so we went over, and I actually remember pulling off the side of the road, and I called him and I said, would you ever sell your building? And he said, that is crazy. He's like, we listed it 2 days ago, and I haven't put a sign up yet. And I was like, well, this is meant to be. And so
literally meant to be.
Literally meant to be. And I said, well, great. What do you want for it? And he said, and I said, great. I think that's perfect. And we bought it, and he never even put a sign in front of the building. And great man, in fact, a really good friend of mine. And so we went in, Jill and I went in there, and I remember walking through the store, and I was like, you know what? We got into there's a cathedral part of the store with great big timber beams, and it's put together. If you know architecture and you know construction, you know that there's no nails in the one part of the building. It's all wood dowels and timber beams,
which is so on brand.
Right. And so we got in there, and I go into the cathedral part of it. The rest of the building was sheetrocked and kind of a little more commercialized. And I walked in, I said, Jill, we cannot do a flooring store in this part of the building. It's just way too cool. And we just sat and looked at it. I'm like, what could we do? And forever, my friend Andy and I were like, what if we started a store and we only sold the things that we love? And I said, I'm going to call Andy and have him come over and check this out. This might be the moment where we need to launch this idea. And that's where it came. And so the branding part of it was the funnest part for us to put together because our friends and partners had lived in Europe twice, and the most recent time was in Zurich, Switzerland, and they were passionate about travel and experiences and lifestyle, and they got me hooked on the whole thing. And so the word Fernweh is a Swiss German word that actually, the best translation is it's the opposite of being homesick. It's wanderlust, or it's this desire to go out and to be out of your home and to experience the world and to travel and for
adventure and live a rich life. Yeah.
And so when we came up with that word, that translated into, we need this to be a sensory experience when you come into the store. So we were the last item on our list to equate to success, quote unquote, for the store was profitability. We sat down, we said, what do we want to achieve by this? We wanted our kids to watch us do a startup from absolutely zero. So we had zero money, and we each invested maybe $10,000 to buy our first merchandise.
Right.
But we never took a check. We never did anything. Every time an item sold, we bought another item with it, and we just kept rolling it into it. So from that concept, it built up. So profitability was the least important. One of the most important was for our kids to participate in this. And my girls still work over there. They hate it. That's the irony, is that they don't want to go there and work.
Of course.
In fact, 2 of them are supposed to work this
Like
weekend.
any good parent,
I spent the morning arguing with them about which one was going to actually get out of work. And
Damned if we do and damned if we don't.
Exactly. And so, but high up on that list was, we wanted our community to experience a sensory overload when they walked into the building. And by that I meant, we wanted them to hear with their ears our favorite soundtracks and songs. We wanted them to smell the scents that we had discovered from the fragrance that's in Fernweh is actually a company named Santa Maria Novelia, and they're out of Italy, Florence, Italy. And my friend Andy had found these guys, and they've been around since the 1300s.
Wow.
Is when their company started. And it was just like, for us, and they make this potpourri of all things. And we filled the building full of potpourri. And the first thing everybody says when they walk into Fernweh is, I love the smell.
Love how it smells. Yeah.
And then, and oddly enough, that company cut us off. We can't buy their product anymore. So it's actually not something we can sell in there. But and then it just went on. We wanted it to be a visual experience. We wanted it to be a studio. We bought all these old motorcycles from the 1950s, European, Italian race bikes, and they're hung up on the walls. And we've got, so it's almost like somewhere in between a museum and an art studio and a retail experience. And so the branding of it just really came together once we identified what we wanted to do with that. Then the actual logo, which is a stag head, and the font and these other things, we just went through all of our travels, most of them specific to Europe, and we just said, that feels amazing, right? This feels great. And I've actually duplicated that process on 2 other companies that we've started in the last 10 years. But Fernweh was for sure the funnest one.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
See, so tell me more about that. I knew there was more to your, entrepreneur story than I was aware of. So at least 2 other companies that you've started.
Yeah, we've got, and I've got partners in all of these, so I certainly don't take credit for all of this. But what you find is, when you're an entrepreneur, you gravitate towards people that share that passion with you. And it's like maybe I shouldn't use this, but it's like talking an alcoholic into going to get a drink at the bar, right? It's like, hey, do you want it? Yes, I do.
Sounds good.
I've got this idea. Okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
Am I going to lose all my money? Probably. Okay, I'm in.
It's going to be incredibly stressful and a roller coaster. Exactly. Sign me up.
So we got together.
It's almost like running ultras.
Exactly. Right. Once that's why I won't run a full 100 miles, because I'm like, I cannot get that in my blood, because my body and my calendar can't handle the.
Well, you know what we need to do? Don't let me get too distracted, because I want to hear about the other businesses. But on brand with Fernweh, we need to go run UTMB.
Yeah, I would like to do that.
I would do it with you.
Yeah, I would.
Like, very sincerely, I would stick together and go run that race.
Yeah, that one's been on my. In fact,
we need to make that happen.
We're going over there a week from Tuesday, and one of my things that I told Jill is, I said, I want to hit some of these iconic trails.
Yeah,
and she's like, all right,
So I'll find it afterwards and send it to you. But I found a travel agency that does like UTMB tours.
Yeah.
And you'll run it in like 5 days.
Yep.
So they're big days.
Aid stations, drop you off and pick you up.
15, 20 mile days. And then you stay in like the little, and I forget what they're called, like refuge.
I know what you're talking about. The cabins that are along the way.
Yeah.
You check into I had friends that just did that. They went from, Italy into Switzerland, and they did that, and it was like 15-mile days, and then you stop at a cabin in the middle of nowhere, no electricity, no power, and waiting for you is a dinner, like
a warm meal, and then the next morning you're on again, which
I'd be down with that for sure.
So we'll do either that or UTMB.
Yeah.
How about that? But we got to make it happen.
Yeah, I would love that.
Anyway, tell me more about the other businesses.
Okay, so we did the first one, one of the more recent ones that we've done. We decided to start it. It was a window treatment company. So if you've ever gone shopping for window treatments, blinds, shades, and drapes, it is, other than carpet, it might be the least sexy buying experience that you've ever had. The transaction is just boring, and you can't get on board. And one of the companies that I really like what they've done in an industry is Restoration Hardware. When you go into a Restoration Hardware store, similar to the concept of Fernway, it's a sensory experience.
Right.
You walk in, you smell whatever the candle is they're burning, you look around, and everything is just amazing. And in fact, it's really interesting because Restoration Hardware is in the process right now of extending their brand. They just opened up a travel company, and they've started yachts. And so you book with Restoration Hardware, and you get on one of their private yachts, and you get the Restoration Hardware experience. It has nothing to do with buying furniture, which is what their seed was.
Right.
And you travel with them. And I was like, that totally makes sense, because that's exactly who I would brand myself with if I wanted a luxury travel experience. And so we wanted the window shopping, the window treatment experience for a consumer to feel like what Restoration Hardware meant to buying a couch. And so, if you went out to buy a couch back in the 90s and early 2000s, you went to, what are some of the big companies? RC Willey's big in our region, but you go to, you go to a kind of a blasé furniture store, and they've got it all stacked up, and you buy your furniture, and you're like, that was kind of fun, but it's over. But when you bought a couch from Restoration Hardware, it was a life-changing experience. You probably paid 3 times what it was worth, but you remembered it, and you told all your friends about it, and you did it that brand. And you walked into that store, and you're like, it convinced you to do that. Not that we wanted people to spend more money, but we wanted them to get excited about coming in. So our flagship showroom we built in Sugar House, and we actually did it in 2020. And we signed the lease in February of 2020.
Oh gosh!
And so you can only imagine. I've got these partners, and we were in Phoenix, and we were in a training with one of the companies that was training us on their product. And all hell broke loose when we were in the airport about the world shutting down for COVID. And so we're sitting in the airport, and my wife calls me, and she says, guess what? We don't have to go to church. And I was like, yes. And she's like, the kids don't have to go to school. And I'm like, no. Oh. I was like, can we please send them? Can we opt in for sending the kids to school?
I'll sign the waiver.
And so the world started to fall apart. And I was like, wait a sec. We just signed like a 4-year lease on a pretty expensive space in downtown Sugar House, which, if you've been to Salt Lake City, it's kind of the hub. It's a cultural hub. It's a really cool vibe in that city. We just opened up this showroom, and we were in the process of building it out, and it happened. And so we were a little bit panicked, but we were like, you know what? This will get us the time that we need to make sure that we get it just exactly how we want to do it.
What a great shift in mindset.
Yeah, and that was immediately what we said. Is we were like, look, we're not in this again. Making money was at the bottom of our list.
Right.
We wanted to. I had a lot more concern about not losing money on that company. Fernway's a unique thing, but making money was like we had sat down and we said, is everybody in a position where we don't need to be profitable for 5 years?
Can everybody handle that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of us had other day jobs and some other stuff. And so that was probably the greatest thing about that. And oddly enough, this company's called Shadeco. And if you look that up too, you'll see it's got real unique branding. It's a very polished front, and the experience of buying it is fun, and it's stimulating, and it's inspiring when you go in. And we've gotten into some really cool things that are in that quote unquote category of window treatments, and I'm really proud of that company.
Yeah.
I've got other partners that participate a lot more in it than I do, but man, when I go there, I'm like, this is what my vision was, and this is what we wanted to do. And so we got into that one, and then that company, actually, we realized we were losing a lot of business to AV companies, and so we bought an AV company, and we were like, let's. Anybody know anything about AV? And one guy was like, well, yeah, I've done that.
Bit, yeah.
And I was like, great. Will you be willing to? And so we got into AV, and the two tether together really well. And then my other friend that I started Fernway with, we pulled a designer and we said, we think an interior design store would be fantastic. And so we said, can we partner with you and you can lead us out on that? And so now there's a company called Midway Design and Interiors. If you go into Heber, you'll see our big furniture store on the main street right there. And then we've got another studio that's in the basement, and that one's been really fun to put together. And then halfway through that, we said, you know what, we need to model the experience of buying furniture. So we started a furniture store. So there's a subcategory of Midway Design and Interiors that's called Midway Furniture and Furnishings, Home Furnishings. And so the one has led to the other. And so, I'm trying to think how many that is, but
many.
Yeah,
So I'm glad I termed you a serial entrepreneur, because
Yeah,
I knew
it's been a problem.
there was more there than I was aware
Right.
of. I'm fascinated. Multiple times now you've mentioned this idea that profit is the last priority.
Right.
And it reminds me of kind of that saying of, the guy that likes to walk is going to walk way further than the guy that's headed for the destination.
Right.
My assumption would be that if done properly, operating businesses and starting businesses and running businesses with profit being the end priority,
Yeah.
with a long enough time horizon, will end up probably the most profitable businesses, because
Correct.
you're focusing on these other things. What I'm curious about is if that's a mindset or a tactic that you've learned and adopted, or have you always kind of been able to, because it's something I would love to be better at, is like focusing on everything else other than that.
Yeah.
I'm early in my entrepreneur journey. So
Yeah.
for me right now, money's
ideal.
necessary.
Yeah,
I have to.
You've got to pay the bills.
But I think,
And I was there with Lemco too.
Right.
In fact, I bought Lemco about 30 minutes before the Great Recession started.
Wow,
And
right.
and that was like, and I got to be careful how I say this, but I don't want to minimize any other experience. I've lost a baby, to death, and I've had some very traumatic experience. The Great Recession was the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life,
Yeah.
like without a doubt. And it was because I was where you are, and I had 40 people that depended on me every
Right.
day, and the weight of that, I've never experienced anything like that, and it changed me forever.
yeah.
So scary.
Because I just think well, yeah. I mean, and that's this journey, the highs are so high, the lows are
Yeah.
so low, the pressure is indescribable, all these things. But I love that idea of not focusing on the finish line, but focusing on the process.
Right.
And what a more enjoyable journey that could create. And I'm just kind of curious how you adopted that, or when or where. Like, did it? I mean, I would imagine some amount of financial freedom helped with that, but
Yeah.
but there's got to be more, because I don't know. It just seems like it's a pretty intentional approach for you of the way you've built these other businesses. And I've been able to observe at least the Fernway one. And now
Yeah.
I can see that, that's happened with the other businesses, is you've paid such good attention to the customer experience, the branding, the partners. And I want to talk more about that too,
Yeah.
but tell me more about where that mindset or that belief,
Yeah,
where did that come from?
If I had a therapist in here, they could walk me through that. But growing up, I always struggled with a whole bunch of stuff, and so you'll get where this is going in one second. But I remember when I finally took the reins at Lemco, and Lemco, we're dealing with two questions right here. One of them is, so let me define first what profitability means for us. Profit's not important as long as you're paying the bills.
Right.
If you're not making the rent payment and you're not making payroll,
That's a problem.
That is not in my arena of what profitable means.
clarification.
That means
Yes.
that, look, like, we're not just running this thing with the wheels off the bus. Like, we are going to we have to have a model that will allow us to break even
To cover our
every
expenses.
month. And so,
but you're not saying I want to get rich.
but I'm not, but making a lot of money has never been the focal point of any. And to be honest, I've probably left a lot of money on the table through the years. Like, a perfect example of that is Lemco is the mothership. It's kind of what feeds the fire for these other visions that I've had, or
Right.
that I've wanted to experience. And Lemco's pretty close to a $30 million company right now. And when I took it over, it was at 4.5 million,
Wow.
because it was in that Great Recession, right? And I really thought we were going to lose everything. I remember I lost $1 million in cash within like less than 90 days when that recession hit.
Jeez.
And I was, I mean, I couldn't, I still have to take a couple Tylenol PM to go to bed every night because I can't sleep.
Right.
Like it destroyed me, but it was also really good for me. And so, but even through that experience, I remember I sat everybody down and I had one girl that was a comptroller, and I said, look, as we go through this, I don't want what I have to pay these people to decrease by a penny if it doesn't have to happen. And I remember in 2009, I think I took a salary of like $23,000.
Wow.
And that was not as, I don't think you could survive on that today, but even back then and I had 3 little kids,
Yeah.
it was traumatic. I had 2 at that time and 1 on the way. And so for me to say I'm going to cut everything off, like that was a tough discussion to have with my wife. But I remember saying that I want all of these people that are going to be along for the ride with me in this one thing. I want them to feel safe and secure, and to know they need to know that I'm not going to try to get through this and cover myself. I want them to be, and it's crazy because maybe if there was 30 of those people, 20 of them are still with me today.
No way.
And so that was in 2008, and it's 2024, and I've still got the majority of those people I've got people, our average tenure at our company a couple of years ago was probably in the 20-year category. That was people just didn't leave, and that goes back to, I think, kind of your original question is the motto that we live and die by at Lemco is it's people over profits. And so I am in the business of giving an employee a safe place to come in the morning and where they can relieve themselves of whatever's going on in their personal life. When they walk through those front doors, they know they're safe, they know they're loved and cared about, and they know that I see them as individuals before employees. And it's mutually beneficial because then the stresses that I feel are different than just, I can focus my stress on, okay, I'm doing this for a reason. And they've given me the best years of their lives, not to me, but to the idea of that.
Right.
And these people have just, I could never express to these people that have spent their entire careers working there, how inspiring that is for me, and how honored I am that they would choose to do that.
Isn't that a wild thing that, and I don't mean this in like a braggadocious way, but that your dreams are big enough that other people's dreams can fit within it.
Yeah,
there's all
I've never
all
thought
these
of
dreams
that.
coming true,
Yeah.
that they're getting to live the life they want to live,
right,
and the fulfilling life they want to have, and that can fit within that. I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, you're right. And let me be clear. I went to college to be a doctor, and when I was in high school, I was vice president of Health Occupation Students of America, and I worked at Cottonwood Hospital down in Murray, and all I was ever going to do was to work in the healthcare, and I knew it, and I was going to go to college for it, and I had a game plan, and I was a biology major at the University of Utah, and I was working so hard to get B's, so hard at basically entry level.
Sounds like an entrepreneur.
Like chemistry and biology 110 and 220. Like in these classes, I was just like, and I remember the walk of shame to the counselor's office after I'd been in college for a year, and I had to change my major. And it wasn't that I was quitting, but I knew I needed to change. I was not. And now if I look at that and I imagine myself going to an office and staying in that building for 10 hours at a time in that single office, servicing patients and living that life, it blows my mind. I would have died on the vine.
Literally.
Because I have to be, for me to spend 4 hours in my office is a big deal in my brain. Like I've got to be in different locations. I've got to be I can't do that. And so going back to that, I had to walk into the counselor's office, and I changed my major, and I'm like, what gets me out of here the fastest? And they're like, that's not the question we want to answer. What do you want to do? And let's take an aptitude test. And I was like, fine, I'll take it, and I'm like, but what gets me out of here the fastest? Like, can I get out of here in 3 years with a degree, 4-year degree? And they're like, well, technically, if you went summers and did night classes and did this, and I'm like, that's what I want then. What's in there? And they're like, well, here we can, and not to minimize this degree because it's been crucial to so many people. But I landed on organizational communications, and I'm like,
Actually, that sounds like a great degree.
right. And like that was the thing is I went into it thinking, how fast can I get out of here? And I got into it and I was like, man, I absolutely love people and I love organizations and I love putting systems and processes and then communicating those processes and making your dream feel appealing to somebody else who's willing to go along with you for the ride. And so that degree actually ended up being very beneficial.
So I actually had, his name's Michael DeLisser, and I had him on as a guest on the podcast, and he was one of the professors at University of Utah in their organizational communications department. So
Interesting.
I have no idea like the timelines or how they
Super cool.
But it was so fun to talk to him about all just these communication nuance. And anyway, I can see how
I was
that would be an amazing
96
degree.
to 99 as I spent at the University of Utah getting that degree. And still to this day, like my I've got an 18-year-old that's getting ready to start his life. I was like, dude, you got to go get an organizational communication degree. I was like, you are marketable to the end of your life. Like you can go anywhere and do anything. You can be an entrepreneur. You can work in a corporate setting. You can work in a small business. I was like, that will help you more than you ever. So it ended up being a huge, what I thought at the time was a devastating fork in the road where I had to leave my dream that I had had for so many years and get into that. So you can imagine my disappointment when I agreed to go to a carpet store and work. So here I was envisioning myself in a prideful manner of I'm going to be a professional and I'm going to have this big degree and I'm going to do these important things. I just changed to an organizational communication degree. Not that it's bad, but it's not what I wanted to do. And I accepted a job as a receptionist at a carpet store, which was my dad and a couple partners. And I was like, I will never, ever work here. Like, this is so unappealing to me. And I started as a receptionist and I loved it. Like, I loved the people. I loved the construction industry. And they gave me some autonomy to kind of do what I wanted to do. And and then I became the accounts receivable. I managed the warehouse. I cleaned the building at nights so that I could pay for school. I did like every job that was in there. I did it. And all of a sudden I was like, I absolutely love this. And I was still struggling with my pride. Like, I can't do this. It's just not as cool as what I thought I was going to do. And so I went back to the University of Utah and I took an LSAT test, which is the entry test for law school. And I wrote up a buy-sell agreement and I took the LSAT test and I put both on the desks of the two partners that were currently owning the store. One of them was my dad, and I left my LSAT score and my proposal to buy the company on there, and I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure I've got a future here. And the buy sell didn't mean you got to sell it to me today. It was like, you need to put on paper the day that you're going to exit, and I need to know a clear path to what I'm going to do. And that was how I got into Lemco. That was my experience in the flooring industry. But I loved the people. So many of them are still there. That was 30 years ago and 28 years ago. And so is when I started working there. The buy sell came about in like 2004, maybe, because I think we had a 5-year runway to get into it. But ended up, I did not want to do it. It was not a sexy business. Still, when I tell people what I do, I'm like, I'm a carpet salesman. Like and I'm like, but now there's some humor to it, but I'm like, and so I've spent a lot of time talking to our employees about, it's not about what you're saying you're doing. It's about how we're going to change the experience for others. How much we love each other in this office and what we can do to inspire each other to become the best versions of ourselves. And I don't care whether you come up with creative titles for the job that you do, but we're here for a different reason. And it's
bigger than that.
It's always
it's
people,
bigger than carpet.
People first.
Yeah.
It's people over profits. And we've been profitable, but we've always taken that very serious, that we take care of people
over profits, which again, I think that mantra of people over profits likely increases profits. Mm-hmm. Like if it's a genuine, you kind of go through
buy in.
Yeah.
They buy in.
That authentic approach to it. So I'm curious, because you talked about starting that in the Great Recession.
Yeah.
And I relate to your story so much. So when I quit my corporate job, I had 2 young kids.
Who were you working for?
Ballantine Communications.
Okay, communication company. Okay.
I had 2 young kids. Nicole was pregnant with our third.
Dude.
And it was 2021. Oh, yeah. So right off the heels of COVID.
Yeah.
So I didn't get any of the, stimulus or anything like that. And it was so weird because it felt like I was walking away from everything I had worked for.
Yeah.
Which was so counterintuitive for me because, like, I had the corner office, I had climbed the ladder, I had the title, the salary that went with it.
You're the golden boy.
But I was miserable. And my mental health, my anxiety was going through the roof,
Yeah.
and all these things, and I just took the leap. And so, anyway, I just relate so much to the life stage you were in,
Yeah.
when that happened. It kind of parallels where I was at. So what I'm curious about though, and then you talked about how
I think there's something to that, by the way. I think
no plan B.
Moments when you are the most broken are is probably the best place to start anything,
Right.
because you're so raw and there's no security and it's gritty.
Yeah.
Like, and it is, there's an awesome book out there called Grit, and it's one of my favorite books. And it's like, how do you teach your kids grit?
Yeah.
And that's one of those, like, the things that my kids need most, I can't give them, and I can't teach them grit. And I'm almost like, man, I pray that my kids will go through a recession or
Right.
a catastrophic event where they really got to figure themselves
Learn grit,
out. Yeah.
which is that's such an interesting conundrum, because so many of my favorite qualities have come from adversity about myself,
Yeah, I would
the
agree.
hard times. And so I want to raise these resilient, gritty children. I want to raise them into these strong
Yeah.
human beings, but I also want to give them an amazing life.
Right.
And what a hard thing to figure out how to do both. And I don't have a clue, how to.
Can I share a quick funny story about that?
I would love that. Yeah.
So my wife and I, we love to travel. That's where we spend a lot of our discretionary dollars, is on travel, because it's experiences, and we always go with the kids, and we travel alone a little bit. But so we're in the Bahamas one year for Christmas, way out of our league. We shouldn't have been there. And we're laying in this bed, and we had 2 adjoining rooms in one of these beautiful towers, and we're on Atlantis in the resort. And we're on one of these, so I'm just painting the picture. This is a bougie,
Gorgeous,
We
yeah.
had no business being there, and we were. And Jill and I are laying in bed, and we hear our 3 kids in the other room, and they are having a very sophisticated discussion about which is better, a butler or room service. And so they came to the conclusion that my kids are shy. They came to the conclusion that room service was way better than a butler, because room service, you just get on the phone and you don't have to see anybody, and you just tell them what you want, and then they bring it to your room. And my one son, who's now 18, he was probably 12 or 13 at the time, he made the argument that a butler was better because they would anticipate your needs and then they would bring you what you didn't even know you wanted yet. And I looked over at Jill and I'm like, we've destroyed the kids. And so
It's like, is this real life?
I get online, and we've never gone camping. We've never done anything gritty with the kids ever. And I hate, I am a very soft person. And so I was a Boy Scout master for a long time. I've camped my fair share, and I just don't enjoy it. And so I'm like, Jill, I'm going to buy a camper.
We got to go do.
So we're in bed in Atlantis, and I get on and I buy this camper. And I'm like, we're going to go show these kids like a whole different side. So we buy this camper.
Teach them a lesson.
And of course, in true fashion, I ordered it from South Africa. It was this Conqueror.
I've seen this camper.
Conqueror trailer, and your dad. I showed it to your dad as soon as we got it, and it was really cool. But it was very basic, and so and all 6 of us had to sleep in this little thing, and we took it on our first trip. We went up to Jackson Lake in Wyoming, and we took it and we spent the weekend. And I asked my kids on the way, and it was gritty. Nobody showered. They were pooping in a bucket. They were just like, it was pretty raw. Jill was like, oh my gosh, man, I think I like St. Regis way better than this.
Of course.
And so, and we're coming home, and I'm like, all right, kids, tell me your favorite thing about the trip. And they're like, that was the best trip we've ever been on, Dad.
it.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, we've been to Hawaii 5 times. We've gone to, we do these extravagant things, and they're telling me that they like the camper better than anything. So I'm like, all right, I haven't given it to him yet. So we get I meet him in Oregon. They fly in, and we drove down the Oregon coast, spent 7 days making it back to Utah. And it was gritty. Like, in fact, on the way home, I finally had to check into a hotel at Tahoe
Needed
so I
to
could
shower
take a
and-
proper
yeah.
shower and stuff. And again, the kids were like, that's the funnest trip we've ever done in our life. And I'm like, all right, I surrender. Like, I can't get any grittier than that. We're there. And I was like, you're going to have to figure out grit on your own.
backfired,
So it
yeah.
backfired. But you do want to give your kids a really nice life. But the best thing you can give them is grit and resiliency,
Yeah.
and just a love of people and kind hearts that think of others first. And like, these are the things that I can't just teach my kids about. They got to go in through an experience where they learn it.
Right. Did you grow up with money, discretionary income much? Like,
No.
what was your upbringing?
0. I mean, that's what I tell my wife all the time. Like, I think my disdain for camping is that our big trip every
Was
year
camping?
was a little 20-foot boat, and we would go to Lake Powell. We camped on the beach. We lived off the sand, and I've spent way too many 3 a.m. sessions holding a boat down from blowing away in a storm at Lake Powell. And that was our big trip every year. I think I might have been, we went to California one time when I was a kid. We stayed at Balboa in like the dirtiest apartment that I've ever been in. And so, no, we did not have, my dad worked hard for us. And in fact, that's a huge reason for some of the success that Lemco's had is the foundation that was built by the founders of that company.
Right.
They were conservative. They methodically built what they didn't even realize what they were building. They built it, and I took it from there, and that was where the entrepreneurial spirit just like launched
Just
it
took
off of
off.
a firm foundation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, which is so cool. Just a quick anecdote, but we, last summer, I took the kids camping in Moab, and Moab was way more crowded than it normally is. So
Yeah.
we ended up down at the bottom of Cane Creek.
Yeah.
And there was no cell phone service.
Yeah.
Which one of the dilemmas I have is that like we get to have, like right here, it's a Friday.
Yeah.
My kids are upstairs running around, and it's amazing because I get this kind of like work-life integration
Yep.
because I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What I do is digital, and it's great. The downside to that is I tend to work always.
Yeah.
I'm, on my phone emailing or on my laptop or whatever. And it was so fun to go down and camp in Cane Creek with no cell phone service because I had all these like micro moments with
Yeah.
my kids that I would have missed.
Yeah.
And so that's something I'm going to be working on is like, at least just being present.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Because of the lifestyle is amazing that
Yeah.
I get to do both at the same time, but I'm finding that it's also dangerous because I can take too much advantage of the fact that I can work all the time.
Yeah.
And work.
You have to consciously be present with especially with your kids, because you take it for granted. You're like, I'm always with my kids. Like you, in your mind, you think that,
That I'm
but am I
there.
always with my
Am I
kids
present?
or am I always around my kids?
Right.
And those are two different questions. And so I agree with you.
When did you start running?
When I was a teenager. In fact, I had this conversation with I've got a 14-year-old, and she loves mental and physical health and all this stuff. And I was explaining to her, I think you and I talked about this on the trail of I was an awkward, extremely self-conscious, chubby kid growing all through junior high and into high school.
You had low self-esteem?
Very low self-esteem. That is still a huge piece of who I am today, both in a good way and a bad way. I've got a ton of empathy for youth, and I love picking a youth up that I look at somebody and I'll be like, oh dude, I've had that same look in my face before. And I just know exactly how to engage and talk to them and do that. So that you can't learn that from a textbook, right? And so yeah, I was a very. We didn't talk about depression back then, but man, I was in dark places in those years of my life. And when I was 15, I went down and watched the St. George Marathon, and your dad and my mom ran that race. And I remembered I got chills as I watched the people come across the finish line. I was like, I'm going to run the St. George Marathon. And the year before, I had done cross country at high school, and I didn't love it, but it was just something to do. And something clicked in me, and I dropped out of cross country, and I was like, I'm going to run a marathon. And so I was 14 when I watched them do it. When I was 15, I ran the marathon.
No way.
And so
you left that out when we were running.
Yeah,
I remember you saying that, watching the St. George Marathon, sort of
life-changing for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't realize you ran a marathon at 15.
So at 15, and then I was a chronic runner all through there. I think I ran 20 marathons. I ran my 20th marathon on the year that I turned 40, and then so that was 10 years ago. And when I finished that marathon, and I'd done tons of other stuff, I said, I'm never going to do another organized event. Everything I'm going to do from this point forward, I get up and I do what I want to do with this freedom that I have to go out and do. And so I've tried I have slipped a couple times, and I ran a couple organized races. But dude, it's a really hard deal to get on a bus at 4 a.m. in the morning to be shuttled somewhere, and then you wait in the cold for 2.5 hours so they can finally pull the trigger, and then you finish, and it's like 12 o'clock when you get home, and you're just like, I could have just got up and done that in the mountains by myself and had a very spiritual experience. And instead, I went and did this but there's a place for both of them. So.
We're doing that tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's Nicole's first marathon tomorrow.
Oh, sweet. Oh,
yeah.
Which is she doing? Big Cottonwood?
Big Cottonwood.
Oh, yeah, sweet. That'll be a great marathon.
So I'm curious, it might be a multi-part question because I want to keep talking about running. But you talked about...
That's what I love to talk about. That's my passion.
Yeah.
Running running's without a doubt, it has gotten me... Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, because... So you talk about like low self-esteem and like these depression battles and stuff. And I think it's remarkable that you ran your first marathon at 15.
Yeah.
You also have this sort of stack of, I'm just going to call it a, of evidence about how capable you are with your business successes, your family successes, your running success, all these things. Has running helped impact and influence your self-esteem?
Oh man, it is like I said, at 15 it changed my life. Like,
so that moment,
to get very specific, I think I lost 25 pounds as a teenager getting ready to run that marathon.
Yeah.
And then what happened is I came my whole life changed when I turned 16. Like, I was still insecure. I didn't have a good group of friends. And by the time I was a junior in high school, halfway through, I all of a sudden probably became approachable and started to engage with peers. And I got a great group of friends, and they're still friends that I would consider to be solid friends to this day. And it changed my life. But in everything I've gone through in my life, I tried to convince Jill to do marathons when we first got married, and my brother Chris came up and we were going to run a marathon. We were going to go do, what's the one in Pebble Beach? Big Sur.
Yeah.
So we were going to run Big Sur marathon. And I tried to talk Jill, and Jill's my wife, and I tried to talk her into running a marathon. This is the greatest story. I'm like, this is who I am. Like, this, if you want to know me, you got to run. Like, if you're going to understand why I leave every morning at dark, and I'm like, this is it. And so I'm like, let's go buy you some running. And she was so excited. She's like, oh my gosh, I got the cutest shoes, and look at this outfit. She's like, I am so pumped. And I remember we went to Excel Fitness in Holiday, Utah. And I'm like, okay, here's how we do it. It's in the middle of the winter. We're going to get on this because Big Sur is a marathon that starts it's in April. And so you got to do winter prep for it. And in Utah, April marathons are a disaster. I mean, you just ran an ultra marathon in March.
Yeah.
And so, which means you spent the heaviest days of your preparation in the winter. And that is a really hard way to do it. So I take Jill to the gym, and we get on the treadmill. And I'm like, okay, here's how you start. And she's in her cute outfit, and she's got her earphones and her Sony Walkman, and she's ready to go. And she gets the TV on the station that she wants. And I mean, we're going to run like 3 miles.
Right.
And so walk 3 miles.
Right.
And she gets into it. And literally 45 seconds after she starts it, she turns off her treadmill. She gets off the treadmill. She looks at me and she says, I'll be downstairs. I'm not going to run the marathon. And I'm like, that was 45 seconds. She's like, I hate it.
I'm done.
And she's like, I'm never going to do that again. But she's been the best support through all of it. And she when we travel, I run it's my favorite place to run.
Yeah.
It's because I'm detached from life, and I get up and I always run. I've explored cities. We were in France right before the Olympics, and I remember I got up at 5 a.m. and I was running the Champs-Élysées, and I ran up underneath the Arc of the Triomphe and then down to the Eiffel Tower, and I was like, this is the greatest day of my life. Yeah. Nobody was up yet. The dawn was just coming, and I was like, this might be one of the greatest moments I've had all year. So that's what running's done for me. It's given me self-confidence. It's given me an outlet for stress. It's given me so many deep, deep friendships. When you run with somebody, it's therapy. Like you'll spend hours, and I've got a group of guys, and we run. In fact, your dad knows some of them. They live over right next to him. But I've got a group of guys, and we've been running together for 10 years, and we go out 4 days a week, and their stories are remarkable. I'm inspired by them. One of my buddies is another entrepreneur, and they started and sold the company Kodiak Pancakes.
Oh, no way.
So, I mean, these guys are heroes. I mean, and so I run with this guy, and just our stories back and forth, and me watching him do that. So in a professional context, running's been a huge piece of that.
Yeah.
And in a spiritual context, I've had more meaningful moments, just me alone on a trail where I've been inspired. There's got to be more to this than just making money and producing kids that know how to work. Like, and I found some of those answers out there. I'm a better husband when I run. If I get up, I biked for a few years, and I was passionate about biking, but I would leave. You can't bike in the dark, so I'd leave at 6 a.m. and I would to do a really big day on a bike. You got to ride for 8 hours.
That's the big
7 or 8 hours.
I did some biking recently when I was injured, and the hardest part is the time.
Right? And so you look at your wife on a Saturday morning. You're like, I'm leaving at 6:30. I'll be back sometime between 1 and 3.
Yeah.
And when I come home, I'm probably just going to need to lay down.
I'm just gonna take a
That
nap.
lasted for, I did a big bike race in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Logan to Jackson. It's a 200-mile day race. And we finished, and my wife said, "Put your bike away. I'm really proud of you for doing that.
Never again.
We're not going to bike. We're not going to do that again next summer."
It really, there's something so profound about running. Like the miles that I got to share with you, I mean, you middle of the night, I mean, you saw me in some of my lowest,
Vulnerable.
like just, vulnerable. At Buffalo Run, I got a client out of that race,
That's
a
pretty
great
cool.
client.
Yeah.
And all these things where it's helped me like process all my life stresses and my traumas and
So
stuff.
true.
So for me, one of the things I've battled forever is thank goodness I've dodged the depression bullet, but the anxiety one has hit me square in the chest. I mean, the anxiety is significant, and it's something that I've battled and I've kind of faced it head on. But I credit running to getting through my anxiety, single-handedly. That and I don't drink alcohol anymore, which has been hugely impactful. But I'm just kind of curious your perspective on what do you think it is about it? What do you think it is about running that is so impactful for all these different reasons? Because you've mentioned like these, you mentioned probably 10 ways that it impacts your life, and I relate to that perfectly.
Yeah.
Anybody
that runs does. If you're a chronic runner, then you know what it does for you. I got up this morning and ran.
So did I.
I ran yesterday, and I ran. I mean, I literally I try to run 40 miles a week. I'm not very good at it, but Strava's destroyed me because now I'm a stat guy, and so
now you pay attention to the chart.
One day I'll turn Strava back off, and I'll get back into I'll be a purist again. But
I don't know. I like keeping track of your Stravas.
I know. Well, yeah,
and it's fun to see they're always in different places.
It does
too.
tie people together.
Yeah.
But it impacts you in so many ways, and you can relate a minute. So we all self-medicate, right? And so, which is where you mentioned alcohol, and all of us are we have to find a release, whatever that is. And there's healthy releases and there's unhealthy releases.
Yep.
And so, you just pray that our kids and us will find healthy releases where we can hit anxiety head on. We can hit, stressful situations. We can hit all this in a way where we can sort through it in a safe place, in a non-self-destructive way, and in a way where we appreciate the experience rather than dread it. And so I don't appreciate anxiety yet. In fact, one core memory I have is I had a panic attack clear up at the top of a canyon in 2009, and I had taken a loan from somebody to bridge the gap in the Great Recession. And I was on this climb, and in my head I had created this scenario where I was never going to pay this person back to get me through it. And I had a full-blown panic attack.
Like a literal panic
attack at the top of this hill. And it was crazy, but I was away from everything, no medication. I'm 9 miles from my house at the top of a mountain, and I had to figure that out and sort through it in my running shoes with nobody else there and no other choice.
Yeah.
Like I could either lay down and die, or I could sort through this. And I remember I crawled back home, and that was an impactful moment in my life. And you hit those moments and you're like, man, I'm going to do something when it's that intense. And I just pray that I'll reach for my running shoes or a rake to go serve somebody or some other thing where I can just get through this without doing something that destroys me or my family.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where running's been the most important thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I joke, but I'm sort of serious that you can tell how much stress I'm in based on my mileage.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's an indicator of my stress levels.
Yeah, for me, it's elevation.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'm either going to run straight up a mountain or I'm going to do something else.
But I love it because it, obviously there's like that mental component to it. It's where I meditate. It's where I process things, and I'm moving, my blood's pumping. I'm in nature. Like there's all these healthy things about it too. Recently for me it's also taught me what I'm capable of. Like it's taught me that I'm stronger than I remember, or stronger than I thought I was.
Yeah.
And specifically that, that 100 miler was profound.
Those are amazing.
A literal life-changing experience for me. And it's been cool because now there's kind of like, and it's fascinating because I love talking to entrepreneurs and I love talking to runners.
Yeah.
I especially love talking to entrepreneur runners, that do both. And there's not a ton of us. It's somewhat of a niche, group. those of us that do it, we just get each other.
Yeah.
But something that's a common trait I've found between runners and entrepreneurs is there's kind of this like confident stoicism that we can handle the next adversity.
Right.
That like, you know, I joke, but I'm serious. I say all the time at my office, well, I've done more for less.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like,
right.
I've been through harder times
Right.
for less,
That's
you know,
right.
less of a
That's
reward.
right.
And I've loved the impact that has made on me when it's family or business or relationships or marriage or whatever. I'm working right now on a presentation all about the benefits of endurance.
Oh, cool.
So there's this
wanna see it.
a Latin phrase that is fortitudine vincimus. And what it translates to is through endurance we conquer.
Oh, cool.
And I'm geeking out over this concept that we can take the lessons we've learned in running and endurance and then apply them to other parts of our life. And then there's all these statistics about like how beneficial just simply not quitting is.
Yeah.
Like longevity in business, longevity in investing, in marriages.
Right.
I mean, you name it. If you just don't quit, it gets better.
Yeah.
And then, you know, with mental health and like life and all these things. And so anyway, I'm geeking out over it. I'm presenting it on Thursday at a conference and I'm
cool.
terrified.
Awesome.
Because I'm way out of my comfort zone with it. Because
Yeah.
I can stand up and talk about marketing all day.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable at all, not uncomfortable at all. But this one's like vulnerable and, you know, I'm speaking from the heart. I'm using some parallels with my 100 miler and
Yeah, cool.
life and business and whatever. But I just love that because it forges us into, I think, a closer version of the best version of ourselves.
I agree.
You know, that
Yeah.
we can find.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think, in fact, I want to figure out how I can tune in and watch you do that because everything you just spoke to my core because it's like, man, it's gotten me through everything.
Everything.
Yep. From a 6-year-old throwing a tantrum, it's like, you're not going to break me, dude.
Right.
I've run 20 miles while I'm bonking.
I'm
like,
fine.
yes, I'm
can do this.
I'm going to survive this encounter with you and I will come out on top. Like
Yes.
so that's very cool. I like that. It's a huge part of what you do. And whether it's running or anything else, you've got to have that outlet. It's got to be, you know, for me, it's running and travel. There's something about getting on an airplane and landing that resets my brain completely.
Yeah.
I don't care whether I'm flying from here to Detroit and I'm just going to have lunch in Detroit there. If I'm in a really, Jill always can
Different
say,
place.
I can tell how stressed you are because you'll send me itineraries for where we're going to go next. And she's like, if you send me 3 in a week, I know that it's
bad.
a big week. And so
That's so fascinating because I've told Nicole forever that travel, especially when I travel for work, it reinvigorates me.
Yeah.
It reminds
Without a
me
doubt.
of like how abundant the world is,
Yeah.
how much opportunities out there, all these things. That's funny, but I never have connected the
those
two.
two.
Yeah.
It's in Utah and in Colorado, there's dark months. And so it starts in November and it doesn't get over till the end of March. And so most of what we'll do is we travel to sunny places,
Yeah.
which helps my mental health, my depression, and it gives me a good reset. And it gives me some really good quality time with my kids.
Yeah,
and
which
my
is
wife.
so great.
Yeah.
So speaking of, you know, just adversity and just these things that kind of running helps us get through. You had talked about starting your business right before the Great Recession and how difficult that was. You also briefly mentioned losing your baby. And one of the things I want to talk about is your relationship with our grandpa Cal.
Yeah.
Because you got to experience Grandpa Cal in more formative years than me. I mean, I have tons of core memories with Grandpa. He was just so amazing. But your oldest son, is named after him.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear more about your relationship with Grandpa.
You know, and without hesitation, he's the most inspiring. He's altered me in ways that no other human has, and I don't know why he and I had that connection. And he was the discipline that he possessed is. I strive for that every day. I mean, we had a connection, and so I grew up in the years, you know, obviously a little more than a decade before you, and they had a big horse ranch in California, right outside of San Jose, called in a little city, Hollister. Your dad graduated from high school there.
Yep, Hollister hay balers.
Right. I spent a ton. In fact, that's funny because they're about one of the names that's proposed for the new Midway High School here in the Valley is the Haymakers.
No way.
And my kids were like, Haymakers? I'm like, hey, the Hollister hay balers, it's a thing. Like you can. And so I spent a lot of summers with your dad on that that farm and worshiped the ground he walked on, man. He introduced me to the band Journey. I mean, he introduced me to Broncos. He introduced me to like all things that were cool.
All the cool stuff.
Varney
yeah.
sunglasses. In fact, that's a funny story. One of the things I wanted to buy when we started Fernway is I was like, I want Varney sunglasses. They're this iconic French brand that nobody knows about. And it's like $1,000 for a stupid pair of sunglasses. I'm like, I'm getting Varney in the store. And the whole time I was doing it, I was thinking, my Uncle Chris introduced me to Varney sunglasses, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. They had the flaps on the side, so you got the wind blockers on them.
Yeah.
Such a cool brand. And so anyways, that's funny. So Hollister was this horse ranch, and I would go spend my summers there. So I spent every summer there for like 6 or 7 years, and I went with our grandparents, Cal and Becky. And just, I mean, I just learned so much from him about so many things. And man, I don't even know where to start other than he has made more of an impact on my life than any other human.
Which is why you named your oldest son.
My son was named Calvin, yep. And I don't want to discredit what other people have done for me.
Of course not.
My parents were there, but there's a special relationship between an outside influencer. It's really hard to have your parents be the core foundation because you're just at odds with them through those years. And so when I was going through those years, when I was a teenager and insecure and no self-confidence, last year I went to California when I was 15, but I'd been going since I lived on the farm when I was 3 or 4, and we were going to live there, and then we ended up moving away. But man, the years that I spent there, I didn't realize, and hindsight always gives you better perspective, but I didn't realize how much of an influence he had. He was the hardest worker. He was an early riser. I'm an early riser because of him.
Yeah.
When I first got married, my father-in-law, we moved into their house for just a few months because they moved to St. George, and that's how we came to Midway. And we lived in their house where we were building a house, and or buying this house and renovating it. But I remember he had this motivating, it came from a book, but it was like top 10 things about becoming someone great. Your podcast is Chasing Greatness. This was like the epitome of an outline for how to do it. And one of his things was you pick your heroes and you emulate their behaviors to the T. So the reason I'm even bringing that up is because all of a sudden I realized without even knowing it, I was emulating Grandpa Calvin's behaviors. I wanted to wake up early. I wanted to be around horses. I wanted a ranch. all my core memories of him were in that setting. And he was an amazing guy. Like I remember he would be like, I need to go check on the furnace at the cabin, and in the middle of the winter, and he's like 80 something years old.
And we'd have to walk in.
And he would walk in. He would get up at 4 a.m. so that he could be to the entrance of the dirt road that led to the cabin. And it's a 2-mile walk, and it's knee deep in snow. And he would just go in there so that he could check and make sure the electricity was on.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I have core memories of making that walk with him or on horseback. Right.
Yeah. Those were good memories. Yep. And so, I mean, you share some of those same things, but he inspired me. He was a very holy man. He was true. He had so much integrity to what he believed in his actions.
Yeah.
And we won't even get into what those beliefs were, but the amazing thing is that he had integrity.
Right.
I mean, like if he believed it, you knew his actions would emulate his belief.
Yeah.
And there would never be any deviance. And I mean, he found out his cholesterol was high, which I've inherited from him.
Speaking of discipline. Yeah.
The guy would bring a baggie with anywhere he went, he brought a baggie with his food in it that he knew was going to keep his cholesterol in check. And so many times I've laughed at him because he pulls up and he's got a cooler and it's got his food in it. I'm like, Grandpa, dude, just let loose it. Like, it's okay tonight. Yeah. He's like, well, no, this is
live a little.
Yes, exactly.
And he also exercised his whole life. Yep. I mean, I don't know, but like essentially till the day he died.
Yep.
He was swimming all the way.
I lived about a half mile away from them in Holiday when I had graduated from college, and it was before I got married. And he and I went swimming at the Cottonwood Rec Center almost daily.
Yeah.
I mean, and so he introduced me to the.
I worked there for a little while.
Oh, did you? Yeah, that's classic. That's funny. And he exercised every day of his life.
Every day.
It was just like that. Was just they did the things that, and those things aren't very impactful until you add up decades of doing those things.
And he had 90 plus years of it.
Right. And he was healthy. I mean, to die the way he did, he literally got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and fell over dead.
Yep.
And they lived in the same home all those years, him and Grandma, and and they never had to go into an assisted live. I mean, there's the quality of what they had was
worth emulating.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And he was an entrepreneur.
He was an entrepreneur. I'm in the flooring business because of Grandpa Calvin.
Yeah.
Like, that's how deeply tied we are. He got home from the war, and his brothers owned a furniture store, and they said, we want to start a flooring component to this furniture store. Would you do it? And he was the littlest brother, and they stuck him with the flooring, and he ended up running the flooring store, and that is why I'm in the flooring business.
It's remarkable. Remarkable. Yeah. You know, it's funny, now that you're saying that stuff, there are these things that I emulate. It's like bringing clarity to the influence that's
Part
on me
DNA,
too.
right?
Yeah, you know, I was obviously younger and less aware, you know, of those things.
Right.
But I mean, you talk about like waking up early and being around horses and having the ranch and working hard and integrity. I mean, all these things. And, you know, granted, my dad passed those through as well.
Right.
But those kind of core Sorensen traits. And then now it excites me because I think we have all of these great things that our dads and our Grandpa Cal and, you know, the Sorensens, the work ethic. I mean, all these great things that have been passed down.
Right, he was a hard worker.
And now we also get to have like educated conversations about mental health and traumas and stuff like that. And it just excites the heck out of me to think like, if we can pass down to our kids the best of both of those worlds, you know, how cool that could be.
I think you and I share, we had rough experiences as teenagers living in a home with our parents. And I'm just guessing on that because you've,
rough would be the understatement of the century.
Rough would be the understatement. Anyways. But I do now sit in particular, my two boys down, and I'll tell them, and I mean this in the most respectful way, because of what I went through that was so hard, that I some of the things I still struggle with, I'll tell Calvin, my son, I'll say, do you realize the gifts that my dad gave to you?
Right.
He gave me the experience, and he was a good dad, and he was true to what he believed and he wanted. And the gifts that he's giving to you is that now I am changing so that you and I have a different relationship. And when you're 30, you're going to look back and need to see a therapist because of the crap that I'm doing to you right now.
But at least it'll be new problems.
But if we both look at this and I say that these are the gifts I'm giving my grandkids, is my mistakes become pivotal moments for my kids.
I love that way of
where
thinking
they
of it.
transition into a different way. So it's almost like you're just fine tuning each generation. They're going to deal with different things. But I'm like, Calvin, I'm not excited that I'm traumatizing you and giving you a bunch of grief. But I am excited that you're going to be different with you. Don't ever take what I'm doing and let it go unused.
I love
Use
that.
it on the way that you interact with your kids, and the things that you
And be a
don't
little
like about
better
our
than me.
relationship, you change those and make that part of your relationship with your kids. So it's great gifts.
I read somewhere that your father is the only man in the world that wants you to be better than them.
Right. That's a pretty cool. I've never heard that statement, but I like that a lot.
You know?
Yeah.
Like the that would be the biggest win I can think of, is if my sons
Better than me.
are better men than I am.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great way to look at it.
It's so fun.
So it's So anyways.
Ryan, thank you so much.
Dude, it's been a great pleasure to
Thanks
be here.
for letting me pick your brain.
Yeah.
Thanks for, well, first of all, thanks for pacing me for 30 miles through the night. But bigger than that, thank you for being who you are. And thanks for the impact that you're making on the world and the people around you and your family and me and your employees and, all of these great things. I just want you to know that it matters and I appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
So I've got one of my Inspire by Example shirts.
Oh, cool.
Because you really do inspire me
like that.
through your example. And I could talk to you for hours. So there's two things we have to do after this. I have to commit to doing this again, and we got to go run.
Yeah.
If
you were
got to go to UTMB.
I wish I would have called you this morning. We would have ran together, but
no, we got to go run.
Big run.
Yeah.
Okay.
At some point,
All right.
maybe like rim to rim to rim.
I love that.
Or UTMB or something. But we got to make that happen because we got to travel and run.
I like it
at some point. And I just love picking your brain about so many things. So anyway, but seriously, very sincerely, thank you for being who you are, because you've impacted me in a huge way, and you're impacting a ton of people in a huge way, and I just really appreciate it.
Awesome. I'm glad. I don't know what I've done, but other people have done it to me that have impacted me the way that, so you pass it forward.
Yeah.
So anyways, thanks for the opportunity.
Of course.
Yeah.